you guys see it? Do you guys see it up here? Isn't it beautiful? So, I know a lot of people watch on the Midwesterners stream and on the House Republican stream. They can't see it, so we put it right here. We put the color portrait up, and, I couldn't figure, all of these are black and white. And so I said, why don't we put one up? See, I think, because you come in this room, in a lot of groups, we cycle a lot of people through here. They don't know who the current speaker is. And so what they used to do is they used to wait until the end of the term. And, like when Wentworth was here, it was like the last day, or when Tate was here. And there'd be like 4 people here, and they would unveil the new portrait at the end. And I said, why? We're going to be here a long time. I mean, it would be like 6 years from now we would unveil the portrait. So we just said we're going to put it up now, and I think the current speaker should be in color, because the groups come in here and they look at Howard Nugent. And by the way, Howard Nugent, he wants me to be here for 6 years because he's going next. So see, they take the last one off and they put it somewhere. So he really wants me to hang on. But we put this up. I thought the media would really enjoy it if it was up here every day in color. And and then probably, they'll probably, what do you think? They'll keep it in color, Beth? Or you think when I leave they'll turn it to black and white? Yeah, we'll find out. But I think it could always be color. But they'll probably turn it to black and white after I leave. But for now, I think it's good for the school groups. They come in and they see it, and everyone is very happy about it. So I guess this is the official unveiling. And I couldn't think of a group of people I'd rather have here for that more than the Lansing Press Corps. So great to have you all. But yeah, we've been doing a lot of great things. So I appreciate the Detroit News reporting that I lost my voice. That was great. And then last week we wanted to give Bill G the opportunity to kind of shine with his rules report. He did a great job. And I don't know, I know, Gideon always tells me that the media doesn't like coming to these every week. And so I thought maybe we won't do them anymore. So we took 2 weeks off. And then I read Gongwer. And I said, Gongwer is losing its momentum, and we're going to have to do this because, I read this story in Gongwer, and it's totally off base. On the Weekender, they have no idea what's going on anymore. And I realized the press needs these press conferences to be informed about what's going on. So we're bringing them back after 2 weeks off. And we'll probably do them every week because I just see what happens when I don't do them. The press is way off in left field. No idea what's going on. But anyway, so yeah, we'll talk a little bit about a few things. Number one, did you guys see the pictures before this, the press? Pretty good pictures. So we had a great trip to Washington, D.C., and a very sharp Washington, D.C. reporter for the Detroit News who was there. And of course, I can't go anywhere with a Detroit News reporter where Mauger doesn't plant a question. So there were some unfair questions, but this D.C. reporter actually was pretty good. I think his name's Grant. He's actually pretty good. I think he wrote a pretty good story. It wasn't a great headline. They lie in the headlines, but the story was pretty good. And yeah, we had a good trip, and I think it was perfectly timed with Governor Whitmer traveling to Australia. If you're going to pick a day to go to Washington, D.C. and meet with the cabinet and a lot of the departments and meet with the Domestic Policy Council, picking a day when Whitmer is in Australia is actually a pretty well-coordinated day because you can't get a budget done without Gretchen Whitmer. We all know that. But anyway, I think it was really important, and when we were there, we had some really important conversations with RFK Jr., with Secretary Lutnick, with Secretary Scott Turner from HUD, and Linda McMahon from the Department of Education. We also met with a lot of the department liaisons for intergovernmental affairs. And so I think what's really good, just going through this, obviously I've had very strong relationship and ties with the White House. And in my prior visits to Washington, they've been pretty productive. And there's a lot that the House Republicans have done and are instrumental in bringing Selfridge to Michigan, bringing the new fighter mission from to Selfridge, a new fighter mission for Michigan, the Asian carp. And I'll just say this, I don't think that you see those things necessarily happening if it's not for alignment, right? So I think when President Trump is looking at some of these things, he's looking and seeing alignment between Governor Whitmer and House Republicans and some of our key congressional leaders, people like Lisa McClain and John James. And when he's seeing everyone in Michigan kind of getting their ducks in a row and working together, it just makes it so much easier to get him to act quickly in his administration. But, they had the 10-year anniversary of when Donald Trump got off the escalator a couple days ago, and that's basically when I endorsed him. I was a member of the state committee, the Michigan Republican Party. I was a very prominent Republican, and I supported him that quickly in 2015. So it's been a 10-year ride supporting President Trump. And so I do have very strong ties with the White House, but really taking those ties and strengthening them in each one of these departments, getting to know the liaisons, getting to know all of the people, the cabinet secretaries, some of their chiefs of staff, really drilling down into these departments. And then, with me, before it was just me that had these really strong ties, but when you're amplifying that and you're bringing 40 legislators and you're strengthening the ties for them and you're building those bridges for them and doing that with a lot of county commissioners across our state, when you're doing that, it's just amplifying, I think, the opportunities for Michigan elected officials to really make Michigan's voice heard at the federal level. And one of the biggest takeaways for me is how President Trump and his administration is so laser focused on helping Michigan. And it's not just what I and the governor did on Selfridge and on the Asian carp, but you go and you look at this really important permitting for the potash mine. We saw the House pass a resolution on that to bring domestic sources for some of these key materials that have been largely coming from China and Ukraine and countries like that. Really critical to our agriculture. The work that I did with a few of our members, Luke Meerman and David Preston, really pushing to keep this coal plant open in West Michigan, and you saw Trump's Energy Dominance Council come through on that, which is a really positive thing for our state and really positive for our energy for the Midwest. You look at the speed up in permitting for Line 5 up in the northern Michigan, some really good things going on there from the Trump administration. And you've seen a lot of these resolutions coming through from the State House thanking President Trump for all of these really important things he's doing in Michigan that most of the media doesn't talk much about, because they just like talking about the controversy. But you're seeing every time that we go to President Trump on behalf of the people of Michigan and ask for his help on a really critical issue to our communities, he's delivering time after time. So I thought it was great, and I talked a little bit about it in the Detroit News, but just being there, having the opportunity to talk about some of the work we're doing in the House education budget with RFK Jr. You see our efforts in there to ban a lot of these dyes in the schools, in the school lunch programs, things that are linked to whether it's ADHD, whether it's obesity, whether it's diabetes, things that are linked to that for children, behavioral issues, banning a lot of those things in the school lunch programs. That was in our House education budget. We have legislation to do that on the floor. You see our efforts to get pop and other sugary drinks out of the SNAP program, the food stamp program. I mean, it's fine if people want to, you know, I drink Diet Pepsi sometimes at the press conferences, but you know, if the government is paying for this, the taxpayer through food stamps, we want to make sure it's healthy, and we want to make sure it's healthier than the things that people are doing now. So there's a lot of alignment there, you know, with the Department of Health and Human Services. Obviously, you know, I think a lot of us are very supportive, especially me, of efforts to require people work or seek an education when they're receiving welfare programs like Medicaid. You look at this, and I think it's really important that, you know, I mean, these programs were created, let's say it differently. These programs were not created for able-bodied men to be on these systems for years and years and years. That's not what they were created for. I mean, you're seeing so many people on Medicaid. It's actually really difficult in many cases to get the services properly. It's very hard because, you know, not all providers accept it, and there's a lot more people on it than probably were intended when it was contemplated. We're looking, and they're on there for years and years and years with no end in sight. So for us, you know, there are a lot of people that should be on the program, and we want to protect that service for them. Unlike what the Senate Democrats did in their budget, where they kicked 60,000 of those people off of Medicaid. They took Medicaid away from them in their budget. We believe everyone that has a legitimate need should be on Medicaid, but the thing is, when they won't seek a job and they're able-bodied adults and they won't seek education, you know, they're not doing anything, and they're on for years and years and years. We need to do something about that, because these are taxpayer dollars. People work really hard to give this money to the government, and then the government spends more and more and more and more of this. And if you look, it's a very large part of our budget at the state level. It's like $25 billion out of a $80 whatever billion budget, depending on whose budget it is. You think about that. That's a big program being really abused by a lot of able-bodied people, adults, who could seek work, could seek education, could volunteer, could contribute to society. People that are not seniors, people that are young and could easily find work, that won't do it because they're getting a lot of these welfare programs. I'd also talk a little bit about the food stamps program. Some people call that SNAP, but I mean, it's the food stamps. You know, I mean, you look at this, I mean, Governor Whitmer and the state of Michigan have been paying this out to all kinds of people that are not eligible under the federal requirements, getting all kinds of waivers. I mean, really, waivers has become the norm. So they create a law that basically says you need a certain criteria to be eligible for food stamps. And then the Whitmer administration goes out and just says, okay, we're not going to follow the law. We're just going to get a waiver for everyone. And they're paying it out to, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars they're paying out to people that really shouldn't be eligible and were not who the program was intended for. And then they complain when the federal government is trying to rein that in and ensure that the people that are most needy are the ones that receive it. So I actually applaud what President Trump and the federal government is doing, because we really need somebody to come in and rein in this out-of-control spending going on with the Whitmer administration. And, you know, whether it was the unemployment agency during the pandemic, whether it's all these welfare programs now, I mean, we see all kinds of fraud paid out. I mean, it was very interesting when you look at the the oversight subcommittee that Jason Wolford chairs on a lot of these public programs. And, they were able to go in there and apply for a bridge card using the governor's residence and a fake name, and you start looking at all of the holes in these programs. So we need people to be checking more for eligibility, checking every 6 months for eligibility for these programs. I'm not convinced that the Whitmer administration is doing all of the proper checks that are needed to ensure that only eligible people are receiving welfare programs, whether it's food stamps, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's cash assistance, something we saw the Democrats expand on their way out last year. There are hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of welfare programs, and we just want to make sure that the eligible people are receiving them, because we're trying to get value for your tax dollars. So if Governor Whitmer won't do it, thank God that President Trump and the federal Congress is going to step in and require them to do it through fines and through other policies forcing work requirements. Something that the people of Michigan really support is work, seek an education, or volunteer. Do something if you're an able-bodied young adult, especially the single men, getting welfare. It's just unbelievable. So the abuse continues, but I'll tell you this, Jason Wolford is doing a great job with his subcommittee, and they're going to keep looking into this and finding all of the fraud, all of the examples of the Whitmer administration not doing the proper checks to ensure eligibility, and when they're not paying out accurately and timely, it's not good. I think we had a really good few conversations with Secretary Lutnick. It's very clear that Trump's tariffs are working. When I was at the Detroit Chamber Conference, I talked to a number of suppliers, automotive suppliers, who were telling me because of Trump's tariffs, we're actually getting a lot of inquiries for new manufacturing opportunities with a lot of the OEMs and with some of the bigger suppliers. And they would tell me privately that President Trump's tariffs are working. I also look at the recent announcement by General Motors that they're taking some from Mexico and other places, manufacturing, and bringing it back into the United States, into Michigan and into a few other states. Very interesting that Orion plant, which Whitmer paid out hundreds of millions of dollars to turn into an electric vehicle plant, will now be a plant manufacturing internal combustion engine cars, big pickups, big SUVs for GM. It's very interesting, but thanks to President Trump and his administration, the tariffs are working, and we're bringing automotive manufacturing back to the United States, something that Democrats and a lot of people in the media said would never happen. It's happening. I also heard a lot while I was there at the conference about the real opportunities because of President Trump's policies with China and the drones. We're seeing some opportunities here too to really be a national and international leader on drone manufacturing. So, I certainly encourage his administration to continue helping us achieve that here in Michigan. I know we have an Air National Guard base down in Battle Creek that's doing a lot in terms of drones and UAVs and things like that, and that would be a great place to really expand. So that would be a good thing. We had some great conversations with Secretary McMahon and the Department of Education. You remember the day that President Trump signed that important executive order announcing that that they were going to empower the states and start taking the federal Department of Education and removing parts of that and moving it down to the states and to the local level. That day, we passed a House resolution thanking President Trump and thanking Secretary McMahon and making sure that the federal government understands the state of Michigan is ready to step up and take ownership fully over our education for our kids. And allowing the state to be empowered to do that is a really positive thing. And one thing that I think is really important that I talked to Secretary McMahon about is, we need this funding from the federal government to come down to the states, and we need to empower the states. And one thing that is very clear is there's a lot of bureaucracy in that. And it's tough. I mean, you look at all the grant writing and everything else. I mean, that is a lot of money that goes into grant writing and all that. We're not going to have any of that anymore. When this is fully executed, the money will get pushed down to the states, and the states will have a lot of discretion on how we're going to spend that grant money to ensure that all the federal money is spent appropriately to help our local schools here in Michigan. And I think Michigan is much better situated to make these decisions than Washington, D.C. So I was really happy about that. You look at, remember when Gretchen Whitmer passed her administration new rules that would increase the cost of housing by 15% in Michigan? Just a few weeks ago, they rushed that through. And so you see a ridiculous regulatory environment in Michigan under the Whitmer administration that's really making the cost of constructing a home much more expensive. And so we had some really good conversations with Scott Turner, the director of HUD, talking about affordable housing, regulatory reform, and some of the great things in the big beautiful bill on opportunity zones and great things there. I think talking with the Domestic Policy Council, there's a lot of alignment. I'm really hopeful that we'll get more guidance from the Trump administration on these sanctuary counties and sanctuary cities across Michigan. We see Kalamazoo County as a sanctuary county. Wayne County's making progress, but they haven't quite got there yet on their detainer policy with ICE. And then what happens? They put them up on the website, and then all these counties and cities do the same thing they do to me, is they say, oh, we're not sanctuary counties and cities. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that list come up again and a very clear guidance to those cities and counties of what they need to do to get off that list, because they all have sanctuary policies, especially in their jails where they don't honor ICE detainers. And then when they're called sanctuary jurisdictions, why am I a sanctuary jurisdiction? Well, because you have sanctuary policies, especially in your jails where you don't honor ICE detainers. So I'm really pushing and encouraging the Trump administration to come out much stronger on that. We need to do more about these prosecutors that are not enforcing laws. And I'm hopeful we'll see more from the Trump administration on that, and we can partner with them on that. So there's a lot of really great things going on. The tariffs are working. I think there's a lot of great things going on in the Trump administration, and there's a lot of things that that we shared with them about helping the state of Michigan. So it's actually a very productive trip. And I hear Democrats constantly complaining about the budget, the federal budget, and then they attack me when I go talk to the people making the decisions. It's very strange, those people. But, and I'd say this, just kind of an observation, when, the Democrats point out all the time that, 40-some% of our state budget is federal money. And in some states, I think it might be over 50% of their budget is federal money. If you stop back and think about that for a second, is that a good thing? Because the bigger percentage of a state's budget that is federal money, the more control the federal government has over the states. And when it's 60% of our budget or 55%, why do you even have a governor or a state legislature at that point? I mean, if you're really thinking about it. I mean, we have 50 states, and they're supposed to be laboratories of democracy, and they're supposed to be differences between the states and competitive, and you're supposed to be able to look to other states and their policy ideas, and then the best ones kind of rise across. It's supposed to be kind of a experiment where you can try new things that aren't happening in other states, and then people can live in the states that most kind of align with their values. And there should be differences between a state like California and a state like Texas, right? But the more and more control that the federal government takes over the states, the fewer real decisions that the states get to make, and that's not a good thing. And I think one of the central parts of Donald Trump's administration and his philosophy is restoring the control to the states, empowering the states. That's called federalism. And really bringing in a group of state legislators and talking about empowering the states, and really starting to take some of that power back from the federal government is really a conversation that's well timed. It's long overdue, and really is what was the intent of the framers of the Constitution. So it's a really positive thing to have President Trump so focused on that. I mentioned, and I don't know why the press is so fixated on this, but I think you guys have reported many times about conversations and meetings that I've had with Winnie Brinks and the governor, so they are happening. And there's one happening today, which most of you know. And there was one last week, which most of you know and reported on. So there are conversations going on, and I don't know. I mean, if the most important thing going on in Lansing is accusations that meetings aren't happening when you know they're happening, I don't know. That's probably another reason we needed these press conferences, honestly. You guys need something to write about. But there are meetings going on, and this is pretty normal. I mean, the principals meet, the leaders, and they try to set some parameters, and then, Darren Camilleri and Tim Kelly have been talking, and you'll see them continue to talk and negotiate a budget. So, I don't know. Yeah, you see this quote. I was very concerned when I saw this quote, and MERS didn't report this quote, but most of you did. And we're willing to blow through the deadline. That's the July 1 deadline. Sarah Anthony, the ultimate Lansing insider. We're willing to blow through the deadline. Okay? So what happens for all this time? They're not going to pass a budget. They're not going to pass a budget. Then we pass a budget next day. We're going to blow through the deadline, Sarah Anthony, right? I mean, I'll just say this has been going on, ever since I first came up here and told you guys. You saw Mallory McMorrow, before the election, say that if you accuse me of a government shutdown. And you've seen this consistently through the entire term, led by Mallory McMorrow, but now Irwin's saying it, and they're all saying it. They're accusing me of trying to shut down the government. That's what they're saying. But in reality, they never intended to do a plan by July 1. I've been listening to this chatter around Lansing for weeks where Winnie Brinks has been telling lobbyists around town that she has no intention of doing a July 1 budget, and the reason is because she thinks it helps her leverage politically. And you all probably hear that stuff too. You have sources. That's what their plan has been all along, is not to do a budget by July 1. And truthfully, on many of these things, they want a government shutdown, and they think that they'll win that argument. Now, if you remember, we passed a government shutdown prevention plan in February. And to me, because I saw this coming from them, because this is consistently what they've been telling people in the press and behind the scenes, is that they think it helps them politically to have a government shutdown. In February, we passed a government shutdown prevention plan and said, look, we can take these issues off the table in February. We can fund our local schools up to a level until we get a budget done. We can fund our local police our local governments, we can fund the veterans' homes, we can fund the state police. We can take all of those issues that people are most concerned about, and we can take those off the table in February. And then we can work through this stuff, and when we get it done, we get it done before September 30th, hopefully. And they have taken no action on that. Instead, they just try to frame it in a very false way, which some of you fell for, but they try to say it's a budget and it's a cut and all this. It was never that. It's just legit trying to get some of these most critical issues for the people of Michigan off of the table, because our veterans, our local police, our local governments, our state police, these should not be pawns. Our school kids, our teachers, they should be not pawns in a political shutdown game. We showed in February we can fund all that stuff. None of that is the target of any cuts. We need to fund that stuff. That's why we put it on the table in February, and at any time they could pass the government shutdown prevention plan. Now, we also passed an education budget, and we passed a university and community college budget. I don't think the Democrats thought we would do that, but we did, and we've given ample time for negotiations. It happened last week. We're meeting this week. We're going to meet a lot. And I'm hopeful that Winnie Brinks and the Senate Democrats will think long and hard about some of the things that they're saying around town and some of their political strategies, and I hope they really will come to the table and try to get this done by July 1. I've always preferred to get this done by July 1. I just am dealing with a group of people that are not serious about getting it done. So I've told you, I don't think it'll happen by July 1. See, this is why Gongwer needs this, because you guys, you're losing momentum. So I've always said I've preferred to do it by July 1. I just have not thought that these people will do it by July 1, and that's why I've told you consistently that, I think it's going to be much later. But we've got 2 budgets on education and higher ed, and I really hope we can do it by July 1. So we're going to try in good faith, and we'll see what happens. But they just want to blame me, right? Every time they blame me, they make it very personal. Just like they did when they sued me and lost. They tried to make it very personal. They tried to serve me in front of the cameras. Everything they say is like, Matt Hall is doing this. You notice that? They do that. But ask Tim Kelly, ask Ann Bolin, ask people. We're a very unified caucus, and we have a plan. And truthfully, the reason they're so upset is because we outmaneuvered them. We came up with a way to fund the local school districts 20% more than them. And we got rid of all the pork projects and earmarks for the lobbyists in the budget. And, if I'm Darren Camilleri or the Ultimate Lansing Insider, Sarah Anthony, or the Senate Democrats, that creates a problem for them. Because you look at their education budget, all they want to do is tack on 3% to what they've been doing forever. And all they're doing is funding all kinds of earmarks. There's over 100 earmarks in the education budget. Many go to for-profit companies. The game here is you hire a lobbyist. The lobbyist gets the Senate Democrats to put that in the budget, or whoever it is, right? And then you're saying, why is the state of Michigan telling these local districts whether to use this for-profit company or that for-profit company to do a certain test? Why are they doing that? Why is the state of Michigan telling these local districts they should use this for-profit company for algebra or that for-profit company for algebra? Well, the reason is because they have the most connected lobbyists. But to me, really, the Lansing politicians, even the ones that served in education, clearly don't know enough about what these local districts should be doing to do this centralized planning, because it's not working. If you look at their test scores, very low. We went over this with Secretary McMahon. Michigan has very low test scores on reading and on math and many things compared to other states. So this Democrats and Republicans in the past, politicians, trying to centrally plan this and regulate this for every school district with over 100 earmarks directed at the local districts, that's not working. And so I really applaud Tim Kelly and the House Republicans for saying, you know what, we're going to get rid of all these regulations. We're going to eliminate all these earmarks, and we're just going to empower our local districts, and we're going to give them 20% more than what you see proposed by the governor or the Senate Democrats. And we're going to really give them those opportunities to do the best things for their students. That's regulatory reform in education, and it's going to be a powerful thing if we empower our local districts. And a lot of people are really praising this plan and see it for what it is. But that is shaking the whole thing up, and so you've kind of outmaneuvered Darren Camilleri. I think we've outmaneuvered Sarah Anthony, the ultimate Lansing insider, and Winnie Brinks. And so they panic and they say things like this: we're willing to blow through the deadline, because they don't know what to do. But we're going to keep pressing, and we'll try to get a deal by July 1 on education, higher ed, the budgets we passed. And then, because the argument I keep hearing on your shows is that the reason that we need July 1 is for the schools. So we'll try, and we'll work in good faith. But I don't know that the media should accept from these people when they say the reason we can't do it is because Matt Hall won't meet with us, because you guys are reporting over and over that I'm meeting with them. I would just say, well, what proposals would you put forward to compromise? And we'll see what they say. It'll be very interesting, because you have to compromise. It's divided government now. And a lot of groups are really praising it. And then I'll just say on the higher ed, and they're going to give you a sheet on this later, but the media didn't really cover this, but we passed a higher ed plan that is being praised by a lot of the universities across the state. We cut funding to Michigan and Michigan State. But if you looked at what a percentage, and this, I told them to give this to you as a handout, because you guys probably won't report this. You'll say I put it on the screen, so you won't report it. Hopefully, if they hand it to you, you'll report it. But so you have it. It's harder to deny that you've seen it. But all these universities are coming out and praising our education plan, and they're saying essentially what we're doing is we're reducing funding for Michigan and Michigan State, and we're boosting funding significantly for all the other universities in the state of Michigan. Now, some people report this as cuts, but I don't know how a 20 or 30% increase, whether it was under the first House proposal or the second House proposal, is a cut. It's consistently been an increase in every single one of these universities. And you see Michigan and Michigan State are denouncing it, and maybe their association that they control. But the universities, one by one, are praising it. All of them, pretty much. And essentially, if you look at the University of Michigan's budget, and they're getting more in their interest on an endowment, I believe, than our appropriation to them every year. Okay, so for a university like the University of Michigan, the state allocation is actually a very small percentage of their budget. Now, if you compare that to one of our regional universities, it's actually a very high percentage of their budget. And if you saw the numbers and said, okay, if you go to Michigan or Grand Valley, how much do you get per student? They're very different. And why are they different? The reason is because of which politicians were powerful in the 1970s and 80s. That's what our higher education budget is based on. It's like Don Gilmer, who's the guy, Jacob Betty in the UP, whoever represented or went to the University of Michigan and Michigan State. That's what the higher education budget is based on. So rather than who are the most connected politicians in the 70s and 80s, we should do our higher education budget more based on, where is the need and what are the universities doing. I really believe that particularly the University of Michigan, if this House budget passed, I bet you they would raise more money privately from their donors. They have raised billions of dollars than any state appropriation. honestly. But our regional universities, they can't do that, whether that's Central or Western or Northern or Eastern, Saginaw Valley, Ferris. They don't have those kind of donor bases, and they're actually educating Michigan high school graduates, something that the University of Michigan really isn't. I think you look at this fiasco with some of their board members and Santa Ono, and you say this university is on a pretty bad track. And if Santa Ono is too conservative for this university when he's actually very liberal, and you saw what happened to him in Florida, who's the next president going to be? And what direction are they going to put that person on? So I think that we need to see a university president at the University of Michigan who's going to put them on a much better trajectory. I think we need high school graduates going to our Michigan universities. Michigan high school graduates going to our Michigan universities. We shouldn't be paying hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to subsidize out-of-state students and international students, which is largely what the old model was doing. Now, I think that the University of Michigan should really rethink their policies, and they should be focusing on bringing more Michigan high school graduates in. It should be a much higher percentage, like it is at all these other universities. And they can, try to talk about the endowment and all that stuff, but they have very large donor bases, they have very large endowments, and they can offset any cuts we make to them, honestly. I don't see their policies heading in the right direction. I think Santa Ono was trying to move them in the right direction on the DEI. They got rid of him. So I think there's a lot of questions about the future of that university on those programs. You see all of these problems we're having with the Chinese nationals that they're bringing in, some that seem to have allegiance to the CCP. We've had multiple people now connected to the University of Michigan smuggling things in that would be very bad for our soil and for our agriculture to do research for China. It's very interesting. So, there's some things that need to happen there to crack down on that and to put Michigan first. I just look at it and say a lot of our regional universities are doing some really good work on bringing in high school graduates. Remember, our goal is to bring in Michigan high school graduates into Michigan universities and then to get them jobs in Michigan. And one of the differences in philosophy, I think, between House Republicans, myself, and Governor Whitmer is how do you grow Michigan's population? You go back to that population council report, and really, if we're getting Michigan high school graduates that are here, people that are already here, and we're losing those people, they're going other places for college, they're going other places for jobs, that needs to be fixed, right? That to grow Michigan's population, you have to retain as many of those as possible. It's a lot easier and it's a lot cheaper to do it that way than kind of what you see Whitmer doing, which is let's pay hundreds of millions of dollars to companies out of state to come here. You gotta, right, in order to grow the population, we have to stop this leaking, and we have to keep our Michigan high school graduates here. And I think University of Michigan could do a lot more to partner with us on that. And I think you see the House Republicans feel strongly about that. But I'll tell you this, the people of Michigan feel really strongly about that. They've seen universities like Michigan, and in some cases Michigan State, become much more out of touch, much more elitist. They've seen them look the other way on sexual assault and many things. And, and like Michigan State, you would never get away with that if you were anything other than a university, and how it's gone on for so long and how poor their board is managing their university. You'd never get away with it. But I still think they're probably better run than the University of Michigan, and so they didn't get as big of a cut. But you look at our regional universities, they're stepping up into this void and they're actually educating people. And in most cases, they're not focused on DEI and all these weird cultural experiments and changing the society. In many cases, they're focusing on just educating Michigan high school students for a career. And so, and they have a much bigger financial need. But you look at this, right? I mean, look at Wayne State University. And by the way, these are not, it's not they're in a Republican district or a Democrat district, but you see how they're applauding our efforts. They think it's very important. They recognize it's an increase in operations and it has a benefit to the state. So you see a lot of positive things going on, and you see the universities have different views on this. A lot of them see what we're doing and are very positive, even though Michigan and Michigan State aren't. And you see Central Michigan University, I mean, they specifically thank me. And, you know, I'm not really a friend to Central Michigan University. I mean, I'm a Western Michigan Bronco, and so they're a rival of mine, but they're praising me even. So it has to be a really good plan to get Central Michigan to praise me. But hopefully you see these quotes, and there are a lot of other ones. I don't know if Greco's here, but there are a lot of them. Western had one. I think Michigan Tech had one. A lot of them had them. Oh, you got them there? Yeah, Dakota knows every single thing the universities have said about this plan, but nobody reported that, so maybe they will. So there's a lot there. I don't think I'll go on any longer. So what do you guys want to ask me? And it's okay if you don't have any questions.
What would you say are the non-negotiables in the education budgets that you passed so far as you're headed into negotiations later today?
Well, we'll see. You know, I'm going to tell Winnie Brinks, and then I'll let you guys know. But I don't know. I don't know if I should tell you before I tell Winnie Brinks. What do you think? She thinks I should.
But you know what it is already. You have that in mind.
Well, I just say that, you know, we have a plan. We've had a plan this whole time. And that's where I don't agree with the Gongwer reporting, because, you know, the House Republicans have had a plan this whole time going into the negotiations, and we've had to craft that plan knowing that the Senate Democrats were not serious about doing a budget timely and wanted to shut the government down and blame us. I mean, because they think that that will help them politically, right? And so we've had to operate with a plan knowing that that's what their plan is. But I don't know. I think that we'll make some progress. I think we'll get an education budget by July 1. And I'm actually going to work in good faith toward that, rather than just blame other people. I mean, that's their plan. And if you guys talk to people around town, you'll know that's their plan. And you all have sources, so you probably already know it. But we can still outmaneuver them with their plan and get them to do it by July 1. And then we'll work the rest of the budget from there.
How did the plan change when the sub was adopted on Thursday, do you think?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of false reporting on that, but it's a very complex budget. So there were always increases for all the universities except for Michigan and Michigan State. You just had to take the two columns together. So when we came out with the second sub, I just put it all into one column because it was too complicated for some of the press to understand. But now you can't deny that there are increases because there's one column, and the one column makes it very clear of the increases. So actually what happened is the increases actually were a little smaller. They were like you guys, do you have the numbers? Say on the first version, it was like a 39% increase for Wayne State and Western and Northern Michigan and Michigan Tech and all of them. Then it became like a 26% increase. So they were always increases. The press reports it as cuts. It was never cuts. So I just figured if we put it in this one column instead of have it in two columns, you guys will have to report that there are increases. And then with the quotes from the universities saying their increases, you'll have to report their increases. They're actually big increases, between 24 and 26% increases for every university. And then the other change is that it went from, say, a 3.5% increase for higher ed to a 2.6% cut overall for higher ed, pretty much all of which came out of Michigan and Michigan State. And you had something back here. Yeah.
Thanks. Should a consideration be made, obviously talking primarily, I guess, about U of M and MSU here, but not exclusively, should a consideration be made for universities that do a lot of research, that are, essentially research universities?
I think that the priority in funding, you need to look at a few things. This is not a formulaic, is that the word? Is that a word? Or did I make that up? Formulaic.
Formula.
And, Jordan's one of the most intelligent people in the Capitol, so I'll trust you on that. Formulaic. Yeah. I bet you'll put that quote in there. But no, she is. She's really intelligent, so thank you for that. So formulaic, it wasn't formulaic back in the day, and this one's not formulaic. It's just, you kind of look at the policies, right? Michigan isn't educating enough Michigan high school graduates. They have a very poorly run board. They pushed out a university president who was probably the best one they've had in a long time. Even though he was very liberal, he was much more conservative than the direction they want to go. They clearly want to go in a more radical left direction. That's going to put a target on their back. I appreciated what they were doing on DEI and some of those things to try to move away from some of those radical left positions, and then they ousted their president, and now they're on the wrong track probably. I don't like what they're doing with bringing in so many Chinese nationals that we're now learning are not properly vetted clearly. I mean, we want international students, but they're not vetting them properly because the ones we keep finding are doing very, very bad things. So I think they need to rethink their focus as institutions and really thinking about how do we accomplish, if we're going to get investments, big investments from the state of Michigan, if they care about that, then how are we going to get good return on investment for the state of Michigan in terms of educating Michigan high school students and bringing those Michigan high school students into careers in Michigan and things that are practical. And when you talk about research, I mean, they're getting a lot of money in federal research grants, so they can go apply for federal research grants. And if federal research grants are more important to them than the money from the state of Michigan, that's a business decision they have to make. But the investment we make, which is actually a pretty small percentage for the University of Michigan compared to other universities, we're not getting a good enough return on investment for the taxpayer from the University of Michigan to justify the amount of money they're getting, and we're going to get a better return on investment for the taxpayer if we put that money into universities like Ferris and Western and Central and Northern and Michigan Tech that are actually getting a much better return on investment for the Michigan taxpayer.
So are you saying that universities that their operations are research intensive, that should not be a consideration in state funding?
No, I think that's a consideration for federal research funding. But you see, there are universities that are Tier 1 research universities that are getting 24 to 26% increases, like Michigan Tech and Wayne State. But they're doing a better job getting good return on investment for the money we're giving them. And they need the money much more than University of Michigan or Michigan State does. They need the money much more in order to, fund their operations. They do. I mean, they need it much more. They don't have donor bases that they can go to like that and raise $1 billion. They just don't. Whether it's endowment or new money. And truthfully, if they want to fundraise off this plan, they'll actually raise a lot more money than what we give them. Yeah, Beth.
Revisiting your comments from earlier, you said we'll put all the numbers in one column so that we report it the way you want us to report it.
It's an increase.
Does that mean you're directing HFA on how to prepare their analysis of that budget?
No, what I'm saying is the way that they present it, that you guys got, was in two columns. One, what were they called? It was the plan, it was the original plan.
Yeah, that is the HFA analysis.
Yeah, there are two columns,
Re-
and no, I don't give them that kind of direction. What I'm saying is you put it in one column, so you do it the traditional way. So if you do it the traditional way, which is what is it called? Operational, whatever that line item is that's existed for probably 100 years, we just put it in that line item because it was easier for the media to understand than putting it into a way where some of it was based on, let's say, what was it called? It's not items anymore, but whatever the part was for like deferred maintenance and certain things. And then the other column was the scholarships. And when you combine those two columns, it's a 38, 39% increase. But the media couldn't figure out you combine the columns, so we just put it all in one column and we did it the traditional way, which was the whatever the traditional way it's always been done, because the other one was too complex really for the press. So we put it in one column, but it's the same plan. We were never cutting the universities, honestly. So I would say the biggest change was going from 2.6%
The scholarship
cut
portion
to-
was completely eliminated in the higher ed budget that was passed on Thursday. The scholarship portion was not part of the higher ed budget that was passed on Thursday.
That's what I said, it's one column. We just did it the traditional way.
The scholarship was part of the higher ed budget. On Thursday, it was not. This is
Yeah,
something
but if
that
you had the
Bullen was on
scholarship with
Thursday.
the other column, it's a 38% increase, which nobody reported. So
That's-
we
because
just
that's not what
collapsed it into
passed.
one column and said, we're just gonna do it in operations, because it's the same funding. And we just did it that way.
The budget you proposed on Wednesday is the same as the budget you passed on
It's
Thursday?
very similar. The only differences really are that the universities came out a little worse because the 38% increase went to like a 26% increase. And the reason for that is that in the final conversation we had with Josh Shriver, we decided to move it from a what did I say before? It was a 3.4% increase for higher ed. We moved it down to a 2.6% cut. So those are the major differences. It's a 2.6% overall cut, which came it came entirely out of Michigan and Michigan State. And then rather than have two complicated columns that were causing this sort of confusion, we just put it all in one column and made it the traditional way, which is just a direct appropriation instead of splitting it into one appropriation that was for like buildings and one that was scholarships that went to operations. That's what I'm trying to explain.
Time for one question more.
Just blew your mind. Well, think about how frustrated I was. I gave them a 38% increase, and every one of you people are saying it's a 50% cut. So we just put it in one column, and now you have to report their increases, and if you read quotes, they won't deny
Or
it.
we don't vote on your budget, and neither do the
I don't know,
universities.
it's false
Why
report.
did it take you 11 hours to get to 56 votes on Thursday?
Well, most of that is drafting. You guys know that. So when we made the call at 4 p.m. that this is what we were doing, we sat around and waited for the drafting. But you want to get the drafting right, because if you don't, then you wind up like this Senate Democrats, where they rushed a budget in July last year, and they're trying to get us to do a new bill to fix all the typos and all the things they can't appropriate. So, you know, I don't pressure them and say, can you do this faster? I want them to get it right, and it took them longer. Yeah, Beth?
Are you aware of what security changes the capital commission made and why are you not disclosing?
That's a pretty interesting question. So I am aware of some of it, and I would just say this for the media. Like, I just say, You know, I've taken the security very seriously since I became speaker, and the Democrats have made it very personal with me ever since really the walk-off. But actually, no, for about 2 years, they've made it very personal with me. And when you make it that personal, you know, it results in some situations that are not the greatest situations. And I'm not asking for sympathy from the media, but I will say you've always seen, when you see me, I have a lot of sergeants around and things, and there's a reason for that. But with that said, I think when you see what happened on, was it Saturday? Or was it Friday? Over the weekend, and the tragic situation in Minnesota, and you know, you see some of our Michigan federal legislators and others on there, and you know, it is important to step back for a second and think about, like, you know, if even though I strongly disagree with some of these politicians, right? You think about some of the things like Dana Nessel's been through, right? And I strongly disagree with Dana Nessel, or Lori Pahutsky, right? You see some of the things she's been through, right? And I strongly disagree with her. But they have been through legitimate stalking and threats and things like that. And there are Republicans who've gone through that too. The media doesn't usually focus on that, but there are. These are very serious things. We saw how serious it is in Minnesota. And you got to step back for a minute and say, even though I really disagree with Dana Nessel, she is a person. She has a family. And they've been through a lot, right? And that's tough on spouses. It's tough on a lot of people. And then you look at what happened in Minnesota. And every one of the politicians personalize that in some way. And they see how that could be them and their family members personalize that. So we have to take a step back from that for a second and then say, and I didn't advise the Capitol Commission on this, but I did appoint Terry Land to the Capitol Commission. And if the Capitol Commission is telling me, look, there's some security things here that we don't want to broadcast to the world because of stuff like that, then I'm going to have their back on that. I'm just...
A right to know about how much these security upgrades cost, considering it's they're footing the bill?
And I don't know all the details on that. You know, they made the decision, but I'm supporting their decision because I just say, you just saw why there's a need for more security up here. These guys come up with a plan for security, and they don't want to telegraph all the details, and then the media attacks them for that. And I think that you see what just happened, and you say, well, maybe we don't want to share every detail. So when they told me about it and explained their rationale, I just said, fine. You know what? I appointed Terry Land to this commission. Now, 4 of the 6 people are Democrats, but I appointed Terry, and I guess I technically appointed Scott Starr. The House voted for him, but you know, I recommended him. And that's the decision they made. I'm going to support them on it. In terms of what becomes public and doesn't, you'll have to ask somebody else on that. I don't know. I mean, you would think that it would come public in some budget somewhere, but I don't know.
You control their purse. I mean, you can force them to at least disclose what their cost was to taxpayers. There's a constitutional provision that requires that.
Yeah, I don't know all the details on that. And, yeah, well, I am a constitutional attorney. I know the Constitution, but I'm saying that, you know, the Capitol Commission and where their budget shows up and all that, I haven't looked into all that. So I don't have an answer for you on when or if it'll appear publicly. I just know that I agree with them on, I'm going to have their back on, it was their decision, but they have reasons. And that was before the Minnesota thing. And then I would just say that, you know, we take it very seriously here. It's something I've actually been working on for many months, is enhancing the security here at the Capitol in the House, because I do control the House budget. Now, I influence a part of the Capitol Commission because I appointed Terry Land, who's doing a great job, and Scott Starr is on there because he's the House clerk. But I do know that I control the House, and we're working very closely with the House Business Office and our Chief Sergeant Preby, and we're looking at, and we have been for some time, enhancing some security around the Capitol and around the area for the House members. So You know, I'll talk to you more about that at press conferences. Your question about the commission, I just haven't really gotten into the weeds of that to know the answer. The disclosure part of the money, yeah.
Yeah, I just had a quick clarifying question just regarding July 1st. I know we're looking to set goals to have budget deadline, and once you start making questions, you mentioned that you were looking to wrap up education budget. I just wanted to kind of clarify what the goal is. Is the goal to have everything done by July 1st or just the education budget?
Yeah. So I think that a realistic plan is to try to do the budgets that pass the House by July 1. It's kind of confusing because there's K through 12, community college, higher ed, MyLeap, and then there's like Department of Education. So it's kind of confusing because there's two departments of education. They call one MyLeap. So, you know, let's see if we can get those done by July 1. But I think the most core is the K through 12, and we'll make I've said for a long time, I think the whole time, we'll make a July 1 run at that, and we've always wanted to do it by July 1. I'm just saying, with this group of people, it's not realistic because they aren't serious about it. But maybe we can do it on that one. And then on the rest of them, and by the way, we never intended to cut education, and I give the media some credit because some of them reported our K through 12 budget is actually bigger than the Senate Democrats. It's bigger. And it gives 20% more to these local districts, and it gets rid of all the regulations, and it empowers them to do the best things for their district, because it's not working when the politicians up here are getting together with the lobbyists and deciding it. That's not working. And you hear people like off the record say, no one is proposing anything different in education. Okay, well, that's the Senate Democrat budget for the most part. This is a pretty radical difference in education, is eliminating the regulations, empowering the local districts, getting rid of the earmarks. And then when you couple that with some of the bipartisan bills that moved through the House, whether it was making phonics the official standard of Michigan, whether it was having State Department of Ed recommended curriculums that are peer reviewed, whether it's you know, going to a different testing model that gives feedback earlier rather than the M-step at the end of the year, and then at the end of the year they don't get it till next year, and then what the hell do you do with that? It does, you know, rather than reviewing it throughout the year so you can track improvement, dual enrollment for skilled trades, focusing on real life skills and modernizing the Michigan Merit Curriculum. We didn't decide to, look, with this group of people, I mean, Whitmer is there for 2 more years. You know, a lot of the big, bold stuff that Whitmer's doing, she's already kind of done. And we're in those last 2 years. We're in the last 2 years of Brinks and this Senate Democrat majority. And I just say that we still can do. I'm optimistic, and that's why we've done the strategy we've done. I'm optimistic that we can still make some changes that will really impact kids in our K through 12 system in a really positive way. But to me, it's by focusing on those bipartisan issues like we did here that passed with 70 votes, 80 votes, 90 votes, you know, 20, 30 Democrats, right? Rather than coming up with a big, bold, partisan solution, all right? I think we can do some things that make it better. Maybe it's 20% better. And then we'll see as the next governor comes in what bold ideas they're bringing and what momentum they're bringing to do a 90% change. But I didn't think the right solution was to just wait 2 years, which is why we came up with probably 20 bills that would make incremental improvements now. And then when you couple that with an education budget that gives the power to the local districts, hopefully it works better than now. Yeah.
A July deadline. Secretary Benson has said that she wants the campaign finance website fixed by July.
Yeah.
Is there any update on that process? Or like if it's going to cost the taxpayers any more money to fix it?
No, that's, you know, and then Jay DeBoyer and the House Oversight Committee are doing a great job on that, and the House Education or House Election Integrity Committee with Rochelle Smith are doing a great job on that. I think that, you know, it's a concern. You saw how Tyler Technologies had, according to the reporting we've seen, the price keeps going up. It's interesting, it took a House Oversight Committee to pause that allegedly, pause some of those payments, but they still got paid a lot of money, millions, I think, and that's a concern. I've not heard any status update that gives me confidence that that Jocelyn Benson's gonna solve this problem anytime soon. But I know that Jay DeBoyer and Rochelle Smith are on that, and so I would encourage you maybe to follow up with them too and see what updates they've heard.
Something changed regarding your desire to pass something by July 1. On Mackinac, you said that you thought it was going to be well after July 1 regarding the education budget, and that was okay because if we take our time, we're going to be able to do something much better, and we're going to finally fund all these priorities for Michigan. Did something change your mind about the new commitment to getting an education budget passed by July 1?
There's no new commitment. I mean, I've been up here every week.
What you said on Mackinac.
Every week for many weeks, going back to January, saying the same thing over and over. And what I've been saying the whole time is Democrats want to shut down the government. They've been talking about it since before the November election. We passed a government shutdown prevention plan because we wanted to fund everything. I've never had confidence that the Democrats, because of the people we're working with, and you look at the quotes, that we're going to get something done on July 1. But I've always told people that I'll work in good faith to do it on some of them. But I don't have confidence that the Senate Democrats are serious. And I also see that, you know, in many cases in the budgets that we're doing, when you're digging into the programs and you're making cuts, which is what we're doing, not in education, but in many places, in order to get those cuts right and ensure you're getting the best value for your dollars for the taxpayer, it actually makes more sense to do it by September 30. You know, when you're really digging into the programs, you don't want unintended consequences to cuts. You want to ensure that you're getting the most value for your dollars, and in many cases, these departments are not forthcoming in giving us the information timely because they don't want the cuts. Education's not an area where we're making any cuts, honestly. We're actually increasing it much more than the Democrats did. And we're going to make a good faith effort to do schools by July 1, but you know, the rest of it, I think we're all going to benefit, and the taxpayers are going to benefit from September 30th. So hopefully that helps you. So any other questions? All right. Thanks, everybody. You guys missed these?